The laughter started before Dara Ose even sat down. She had just walked through the entrance arch of the Grand Assembly Hall on Conclave Station, Orbit 7. The hall held nearly 400 students from 31 species. They were gathered for the opening ceremony of the new academic semester. Dara was one of 3 humans present. The other 2 were Roll Adrianson, who stood beside her, and a quiet 3rd year named Ibra who had already found a seat near the back. Dara did not know what triggered the laughter at first. Then she looked at the main display screen at the front of the hall. The screen was cycling through the homeworld profiles of all enrolled students. Beautiful images, smooth green worlds, calm blue oceans, amber plains stretching to soft horizons. Each world looked like a painting. Then Earth came up. The image was not a painting. It was a hazard file. Earth's profile in the Galactic Registry was not filed under inhabited worlds. Class 1 through 3, like most civilized planets. It was filed under a different category entirely. At the top of the screen, in bold red letters, it read, Deathworld, Tier 5. Below that, the tags appeared one after another like a list of catastrophes. Seismic instability, extreme weather variance, tidal force disruption, apex, predator saturation, high-density microbial ecosystem, radiation fluctuation, atmospheric chemical volatility, oceanic pressure anomalies, geological, resurface cycles. At the very bottom, in smaller text, a note from the original survey team, logged. Over 2,000 years ago, no sapient species expected to evolve. Continued. Monitoring recommended. Ongoing anomaly. That last line got the biggest laugh. A large student in the 3rd row Grav, a Mindori, wide-shouldered and gray-skinned, with 4 slow, blinking amber eyes turned in his seat and looked directly at Dara. He said it loud enough for the rows around him to hear. They sent creatures from a Tier 5 death world to study science. Should we be worried about the furniture? More laughter. Not all of it cruel. Some of it was just the easy kinda laugh that comes when someone else is the strange thing in the room. Dara sat down. Roll leaned close and spoke quietly. How do you want to play this? She was already writing something in her notebook. She finished the sentence, capped the pen, and said, We let them teach us. Then we remind them what we come from. Roll looked at the screen. Earth's profile was still up. The list of hazard tags was longer than any other world in the database. He looked at it the way a person looks at something familiar, something that just is. Works for me, he said. The ceremony began. Instructor Sova took the stage tall, crystalline-boned, moving with the careful grace of the Venali. He had the look of someone who had been teaching for a very long time and had stopped being surprised by anything. He welcomed all students. He noted, briefly, that Orbit 7 was proud to host its first human exchange participants under the new Observer Status Agreement. He said it the way you mentioned the weather. After the ceremony, students moved to their assigned quarters. Dara and Roll were given rooms on the lowest residential tier. The hallways down there were narrower. The lighting was different. A student from a Valari delegation passed them in. The corridor looked at the room number on Roll's key card and made a sound that may or may not have been a laugh. It was hard to tell with Valari. Roll looked at the room. Small. Functional. He dropped his bag on the narrow bed. Could be worse, he said. Dara stood at the small window. Outside, the station's outer ring curved away in both directions. Stars beyond it, still and cold. She thought about home. The noise of it. The heat. The way a rainstorm felt when it came in from the coast. The way the city smelled after rain. She thought about the last thing her mother said before she left. You are not going to impress them by being better than them. Impress them by being exactly what you are. She pressed her hand flat against the cool metal wall of the room. Okay, she said quietly. Not to Roll, just to herself. The next morning, they were assigned their full class schedules. Dara's xenobiology group had 22 students. She was the only human. Roll's materials engineering group had 16. He and Ibra were the only humans in the whole engineering block. In the first xenobiology lecture, Instructor Sova used Earth as a case study. Within the first 15 minutes, not as an example of success, as an example of what he called runaway evolutionary pressure producing unstable and uncontrolled complexity. He had charts. He had graphs. He had a calm, dry voice that made the whole thing sound like obvious fact. Dara wrote it all down. Later learned was named Lirith glanced back at her once. Not unkindly. Just checking. Dara gave a small nod. Lirith turned back to her own notes. That evening, Dara opened her notebook to the first page. She read what she had written during the opening ceremony, when the room had laughed and Grav had made his joke about the furniture. The line read, "They will understand. Give them time." She looked at it for a moment. Then she turned to the next blank page and started writing her first lecture notes. There was a lot to learn here. She intended to learn all of it. 3 weeks in, a pipe burst in the lower residential corridor. It was a coolant line, narrow but pressurized, and it came loose at a junction near the common washroom. The spray was not dangerous, cold and chemical smelling, but not toxic. A small alarm went off. 2 Valari students stepped back from it. A Mindori student named Druss stood in the hallway looking at the spray with the careful expression of someone calculating who else's problem this was. Roll came out of his room, looked at the pipe for about 4 seconds, went back inside, came back out with a roll of repair tape from his travel kit, and fixed it. Not perfectly, but well enough to stop the spray and hold until station maintenance arrived. Druss watched him do it. He said nothing for a moment. Then, "You carry pipe tape?" "I carry a lot of things," Roll said, peeling off his gloves. "Why?" Roll thought about how to answer that. He said, "Because things break." Druss looked at the patched pipe. "They have maintenance staff for that." "Yes," Roll said. "And right now they are not here." He went back to his room. Druss stood in the hallway for a little while longer, looking at the taped pipe before walking away. The academic weeks had settled into a pattern. The pattern was not comfortable, but it was clear. Dara and Roll sat at the edge of things. They were not excluded by force. They were excluded by assumption by the way groups form when everyone already knows everyone else, and the 2 new ones are from a place that makes the Galactic Registry's hazard list look like a nature documentary. Grav had not stopped making comments. They were lighter, now more habit than cruelty, but they were there. In the 3rd week, during a group discussion on interspecies cognitive development, he had said, "Perhaps we should ask the humans. They evolved dodging predators, after all." Very fast threat response. Not much else. Several students laughed. Dara said, "Actually, that's almost right." The room quieted slightly. She continued, calmly, "Threat response is one part of it. But you cannot survive a Tier 5 world on reflexes alone. You also need memory, pattern recognition, long-range planning, social coordination, and the ability to solve problems you have never seen before. Those are the same things that built our science. They came from the same place." Grav had no quick answer to that. He moved on. Instructor Sova noticed. He said nothing. The real shift happened in the 4th week, during a practical lab on survival scenario modeling. The lab was a theoretical exercise. The students were given a simulated environmental collapse on a Class 2 world and asked to produce a stabilization plan. They had 2 hours. The expected completion time, for most species, was 90 minutes to 2 hours. Dara finished in 38 minutes. Sova looked at her completed model. He went through it twice. He did not say it was good. He said it was unconventional, but he also could not find a flaw in it. After class, a student came to find her. It was Lirith, the Venali student, who had glanced back at her on the first day. "Can I ask how you approached the collapse model?" Lirith said. She had the careful speech of someone who had prepared the question in advance. Dara thought about it honestly. "I didn't try to find the perfect answer," she said. "I looked for the fastest path to a solution that was good enough to stop the immediate damage. Then I built from there." Lirith was quiet for a moment. "We are taught to find the optimal solution. How long does that take?" "Usually the full time available." "And if you don't have the full time?" Dara asked. Lirith had no immediate answer. That seemed to bother her in a productive way. She asked if they could talk again sometime. Dara said yes. It was the first real conversation she had with anyone on the station who was not Roll or Ibra. In the engineering block, Roll's practical scores were drawing quiet attention. Not because he was the fastest or the most technically precise, he wasn't, but because his solutions worked under conditions they were not designed for. In a stress tolerance lab, every student was given a cracked containment brace and Asked to identify the failure point. Roll identified it, and then, without being asked, reinforced 3 other points he said would fail next. The instructor asked him how he knew. We build things and they break, Roll said. You learn to see where the next break is coming. The instructor marked it as outside the scope of the exercise. But he also wrote something in his notes. By the end of the 4th week, Grav had filed a formal complaint with the conclave administration. It stated that the human students were disrupting academic culture through inconsistent and unpredictable problem-solving approaches that did not align with established methodology. The administration reviewed the complaint alongside the humans' academic performance records. Their scores were above average across every subject. The administration filed the complaint without action. Nobody told Dara or Roll about the complaint. They kept going to class. They kept writing things down. And Lirith, 2 days later, slid into the empty seat beside Dara at the start of xenobiology and opened her notebook without saying a word. Dara did not say a word either. They both just started taking notes. That was enough. The survey moon had no name in the common registry, just a number. It was a Class 2 biome, mild temperatures, thin but breathable atmosphere, low biological complexity. Instructor Sova had called it ideal for a routine ecological survey, the kind of place where nothing was supposed to go wrong. 20 students rode the shuttle down. The landing zone was a flat basin edged by low stone ridges. The sky was pale orange. The ground crunched under their boots like packed salt. Survey equipment was unloaded and distributed. Everyone spread out in their assigned pairs. Dara was paired with Lirith. Roll was paired with a Valari student named Set, who had barely spoken to him before, but was at least willing to carry half the gear. Grav worked alone. He had requested it. He was doing atmospheric sampling near the eastern ridge, which was technically the furthest point from the landing zone. But Sova had approved it. Grav was big and confident, and his species were known for their physical resilience. Nobody thought twice about it. The first hour passed without incident. The survey data was clean. Sova walked between the groups, making notes on his tablet, occasionally correcting someone's collection technique. It was, as promised, routine. Then the ground moved. It was not a large seismic event by any real measure. A short, deep shudder. On Earth it would have been a minor tremor, the kind that rattles dishes and makes people pause and then go back to what they were doing. Here, on a moon-rated class 2, it was unexpected enough to stop everyone cold. Then the eastern ridge cracked. Not all of it. A section roughly 40 meters wide sheared loose at the base and came down in a slow, grinding collapse. The sound reached them a second after the side a low, rolling crack that bounced off the basin walls. Grav was below the ridge. Sova's voice came through the comm. All students hold position. I am assessing. But Dara was already moving. Not running. Moving with purpose, the difference between panic and direction. She had her pack over one shoulder, her sample scanner in her left hand, and she was calculating the distance to the ridge before she was fully aware she had made a decision. Roll was beside her in 4 seconds without being asked. Set stayed where he was. Gas, Roll said quietly, pointing. He was right. A crack in the newly exposed rock face was releasing something. A pale, thin vapor, barely visible, drifting southeast with the wind. Dara stopped, turned into the wind, and tested it with the scanner. Sulfurous compound. Low concentration here. It will build. She looked at the wind direction. The canyon will funnel it. If Grav is down there. He is, Roll said. He had the map open. The collapse boxed the canyon entrance. There is one other exit, northwest side. They reached the collapsed section in 2 minutes. Grav was on the other side of the rockfall, unhurt but unable to climb over the loose debris without risking a second slide. 3 other students had been in the canyon at the time, Druss and 2 Valari who had been collecting soil samples further in. Through the comm, Grav's voice was odd. Too flat. Too controlled. Not calm. Exactly, but blank the way a mind goes when the system it runs on has no stored response for what is happening. His species had not needed fear responses in 11,000 years. The instinct was there, somewhere, but it was vestigial and soft, like a muscle never used. Grav, Dara said through the comm, listen to me. Do not move toward the main Collapse. I need you to move northwest. Do you see the gap in the far wall? A pause. Yes. Go there. Bring the others. Move slowly and do not disturb the loose rock on your left side. I will tell you each step. Go now. She guided him from outside the collapse while Roll found the northwest exit and started pulling debris from it from the outside. It was not elegant work. It was heavy and fast, and left his hands scraped. Set arrived after a minute and helped. Without being asked, which Roll noted and appreciated. Lyrith stayed with Sova at the edge of the safe zone, monitoring the gas readings and relaying numbers to Dara. 7 minutes after the ridge came down, Grav stepped through the northwest exit. He was dusty and slow, and his amber eyes were wider than usual. Druss and the two Valari came out behind him. The gas concentration behind them was already climbing. Everyone moved upwind. Sova counted heads. Everyone was there. For a while, nobody said anything. Then Grav looked at Dara. His voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. Were you afraid? She thought about lying. It would have been easy. Yes, she said. But we do not stop when we are afraid. On Earth, stopping when you are afraid is how you die. Grav looked at the gap in the rocks where he had come through. He looked at his own hands. Then he reached into his pack, pulled out his comm, and opened the Galactic Registry. He found Earth's entry. He started reading it. Not skimming it. Actually reading it, from the beginning. Every line. The shuttle took them back to the station an hour later. Sova sat in the front row, and did not speak for the whole journey. He did not mock anyone that day, or any day after. The assignment came from Sova himself, and he gave it with a straight face. He told Dara and Roll that as part of their mid-semester evaluation, they would present a full biosphere profile of Earth to the xenobiology class. 30 minutes. All students required to attend. He framed it as a remedial exercise, a chance for the two humans to demonstrate baseline familiarity with their home ecosystem. The implication was clear. It was the kind of assignment you gave to students you expected to struggle. Dara accepted it with a nod. Roll, walking out of the office afterward, said, "He thinks we're going to stand up there and read off the hazard tags." "He does," Dara said. "Are we?" "No." They had 6 days. They used all of them. The presentation hall held 42 students the morning it happened. Word had spread not because anyone expected something remarkable, but because watching the Deathworld students try to defend their planet had taken on a kind of entertainment value. Grav was there. Lyrith was there. Even a few students from other departments who had no formal reason to attend had found seats near the back. Dara stood at the front. Roll stood to the side, managing the display. She did not begin with an introduction. She began with a number. 5, she said. She let that sit for a moment. Earth has ended 5 times, she said. Mass extinction events. Each one killed the majority of all species alive at that moment. The third one, the largest, killed more than 96% of all life on the planet. Nearly everything that existed was gone. Roll brought up the data. Timeline charts. Species loss curves that dropped almost to zero and then, slowly, over millions of years, climbed back up. What came back each time, Dara said, was not the same life that had existed before. It was what survived the collapse. The organisms that were too stubborn, too adaptable, too strange for the disaster to finish. And each time, the life that rebuilt the planet was more complex than what came before. She walked the class through it, not quickly, not triumphantly. Carefully. The way you explain something true. She showed the diversity data. Earth produced more biological variation per square kilometer than any Class 1 or Class 2 world in the known registry. Its microbial systems alone, the invisible layer of life in its soil and water and air, were more complex than the total biospheres of 11 surveyed planets combined. She showed the predator networks. Dozens of apex-level species, all competing, all forcing every other species in the food chain to be faster, smarter, more adaptive, more resourceful, or die. Not a stable system, a pressurized one. Then she pulled up the registry. Earth's file. The hazard tags. All of them. She read them out loud, one by one, in the same flat voice the registry used. The room was very quiet. When she finished the list, she looked up. "Every single thing on that list," she said. was also true when the first member of our species learned to make fire. Every one of those tags was active when our ancestors crossed open ocean on wooden boats with no instruments and no guarantee of land on the other side. Every one of them was true when we flew to our own moon, using machines we built from scratch, with computers less powerful than the badge on your uniform. She paused. You looked at our planet and called it a death world. You were right. It is. We are not arguing that. We are telling you what a death world produces, if anything, survives long enough. Roll spoke then, quietly from the side. You treated the hazard list as an explanation for why we should not be here. We are asking you to consider that the hazard list is the reason we are here at all. Nobody laughed. Groff sat very still. He had his hands flat on the desk in front of him, the way a person sits when something has just rearranged their thinking and they are not sure where to put it yet. After a long silence, he raised his hand. How long did it take, he asked, from the first tool to the first space flight? About 200,000 years, Dara said. Groff calculated something quietly. That is faster than any other species in the registry. Yes, Dara said. We were in a hurry. More questions came. Not hostile ones. Real ones. The kind of questions that come from a room that is actually thinking. Students asked about the extinction events, about the predator networks, about why human lifespan was so short compared to most sapient species. Dara answered each one. Lyrith stayed after the hall had mostly emptied. Her eyes were red at the edges. A Denali stress response, not quite the same as human tears, but close in meaning. My world had no predators for 11,000 years, she said quietly. 60 years ago we almost went extinct from a fungal bloom. We did not know how to respond. Half our population had to be relocated. It took us decades to rebuild. Dara sat down beside her. I know, she said. I read about it in your world's registry entry. Lyrith looked at her. You researched us? I researched everyone, Dara said. First week. That evening, Instructor Sova sat at his desk with his lecture plan open in front of him. There was a section titled, Cognitive Limitations of Deathworld Sapiens. He read it once. Then he deleted it. He stared at the blank space for a long time. Then he started writing something new. It was Grov who found them. Not in a classroom, not through a formal channel. He found Dara and Roll eating dinner in the lower-tier common room, which most other students never visited. Because the food dispensers there only had 2 flavor settings, and the lighting was too warm. He stood in the entrance for a moment, as if making sure he still wanted to do this. Then he walked over and sat down across from them. I want to join your team, he said. Roll looked at Dara. Dara looked at Groff. For the challenge, Groff said. He folded his large gray hands on the table. The Interspecies Academic Challenge. Registration closes in 2 days. Teams of 3. I have been watching your work. I want to understand how you think. I believe the best way to do that is to work alongside you. It was the longest and most honest thing he had ever said to either of them. Dara said, You know we will be seated last. Yes. Everyone will expect us to lose. Yes. Including you, probably, 3 weeks ago. Grov held her gaze. 3 weeks ago, I had not read the registry entry, he said. Not really. Dara picked up her fork, went back to her food, and said, Then yes. You are on the team. The challenge was held over 2 days at the end of the month. 5 disciplines. Every team ranked and scored. The favorites were a Denali group of 3 Seri, Pol, and Nast, who had won the challenge for consecutive times. They were fast, precise, and very difficult to rattle. Grov, Dara, and Roll were seeded 14th out of 14 teams. The first discipline was theoretical physics. This was Grov's ground. He was genuinely brilliant at it, deep, methodical, precise. Dara and Roll stayed out of his way and handled the secondary calculations when asked. They came in third. Good enough. Not lost. The second discipline was ecological modeling. Complex multivariable simulation. The kind of problem where most teams try to map every variable before moving. Dara did not map every variable. She identified the ones that would collapse first and built from there, using Earth's extinction event data as a reference framework that no other team had. She produced a model that the judges had not seen before. Not because it was more complicated, because it was adapted for failure. It assumed things would go wrong and built in recovery paths. First place. The third discipline was engineering problem solving. A broken atmospheric processor, a non-standard materials kit, 45 minutes. Roll finished in 22. He did not build what the problem expected him to build. He built something adjacent to it, simpler, with fewer points of potential failure. The judges debated whether it met the technical requirements. It met all of them. It was just unexpected. First place. The fourth discipline was medical triage simulation. This was where the gap became visible. Medical training for humans was mandatory, not optional, not supplementary. Every human student, before leaving Earth on any long-duration program, completed a field medicine certification. It was law, and the law existed because on Earth, in enough situations across enough history, waiting for someone else to help was the same as waiting to die. No other species had this requirement. Dara moved through the triage simulation the way a person moves through a familiar room in the dark, not because it was easy, but because the shape of it was known. She had done versions of this before, in real conditions, not simulations. First place. After the fourth discipline, their combined score had put them in second overall, behind the Venali team by a narrow margin. The final discipline would decide it. The crisis response scenario. It was a simulated multi-system station failure, cascading emergencies, power grid failing, life support compromised, hull integrity warning on deck 3, a chemical spill in cargo, and 18 simulated crew members in various states of need. All happening simultaneously, all demanding priority, none of them waiting. There was no correct sequence. There was no optimal answer. There was only the clock and 10 minutes and choices. Most teams froze for 30 seconds at the start, running probability models. 30 seconds, in that scenario, meant 2 simulated deaths. Dara did not freeze. She looked at the board for 3 seconds. Then she started calling decisions. Because a wrong decision in the next 5 seconds saved more than a right decision. In 60, Roll executed everything she called without debate. Grav handled the numbers in real time, catching 2 errors and correcting them on the fly. They did not win the crisis scenario. They came second. They lost points on deck 3 because Dara triaged the chemical spill over the hull breach and the simulation counted that against them. But their overall score across all 5 disciplines put them at the top of the final table. 14th seed. First place. When the scores were displayed, the applause in the hall was uneven at first. Some immediate, some delayed, some that sounded like people who were not sure how they felt. The Venali team Sari, Pole, and Nas stood and applauded. That was what made others follow. Grav stood between Dara and Roll with an expression that his face was not entirely built to make. Something open. Something he had not worn before. A journalist from the Galactic Academic Record found Dara near the exit afterward. Small recorder, polite voice, the practiced neutrality of someone whose job is to get a quote. "Do you have a comment on the win?" he asked. Dara thought about it. "We did not come here to prove anything," she said. "We came here to learn." It turns out those two things are not always separate. She walked out. Roll, just behind her, added, "Write that down carefully." She said it exactly right. The journalist wrote it down. 3 days before the end of semester, Instructor Sova told the class that his final lecture would be different. He did not explain how. He just said it at the end of a regular session in his usual calm voice, and then dismissed everyone. Lirith looked at Dara. Dara shrugged. She did not know either. The final lecture was open to the full student body, not just the xenobiology class. That alone was unusual. Sova had never opened a lecture to the whole station before. The hall filled to capacity. Students from other departments stood along the back walls. Sova walked to the front, set down his tablet, and did not use it. He opened by pulling up the Earth Registry entry on the main display. The same file that had appeared on the first day of semester, with its long red list of hazard classifications. He read every single tag out loud, slowly, in the same flat registry language they used in the original survey. He closed the file. Then he said, "I have been teaching xenobiology for 31 years. For most of that time, I have used the concept of the Deathworld as a cautionary category. A place where evolution ran too fast, too wild, without the stability that allows real complexity to build. I used Earth as an example of this. Many of you heard me do it at the start of this semester. He paused. I was wrong. Not about the facts. The facts in that registry are accurate. I was wrong about what they meant. The hall was very still. We have long treated planetary stability as the condition for evolutionary success, Sova said. Calm worlds, predictable seasons, low predator density, long lifespans. These are the conditions under which most of the sapient species represented in this room developed. We assumed they were the correct conditions. We assumed that a world which produced none of them was a world that had failed. He looked at the closed Earth file on the display. Earth did not fail. It produced something we did not have a category for. Not despite its conditions, but because of them. Pressure, scarcity, danger. These did not only kill. In the organisms that survived them, they built capacities that stable worlds never needed to develop. Speed of decision, comfort with imperfect solutions, the ability to act without complete information, the refusal to stop. He turned to face the room fully. These are not primitive traits. They are not the rough, early steps of a species that has not yet caught up to the rest of us. They are a different kind of intelligence, one that the Galactic Conclave, in 31 years of my teaching, has never once thought to study seriously. He picked up his tablet. He held it up briefly. I have submitted a proposal to the academic board to establish a formal research stream on adaptive cognition in high-stress evolutionary environments. It was approved this morning. He set the tablet down. We were not hosting a curiosity this semester. We were receiving our most important lesson. He dismissed the class. For a moment, no one moved. Then the hall came back to noise slowly, like water. Finding its level, Dara sat without moving for a moment. Roll was beside her. He looked at her. Sideways. She had her notebook open, and she was looking at the first page, the line she had written on the opening day, while the room laughed. It read, "They will understand. Give them time." Below it, she had added a line at some point. He had not noticed it before. It read, "Less time than I expected." He read it, and was quiet. Then he said, "Your mother would have liked this place. She would have had opinions about everything," Doris said. She closed the notebook. Lirith found them outside the hall. She had printed 2 physical copies of a document, a draft framework for a joint paper on comparative adaptive biology. Earth case studies alongside the Venali fungal bloom crisis. She handed one copy to Dara and kept the other. "I would like to co-author this, if you are willing," Lirith said. Dara took the copy. She looked at the title page. "I am willing," she said. Grav came to find them at the transit bay on departure morning. He was not someone who usually came to see people off. Roll spotted him first, the large gray figure, moving through the crowd with the slightly careful walk of someone in unfamiliar social territory. He stopped in front of them. He looked at Roll first. He extended his hand the way humans do, palm forward, fingers together. He had clearly practiced it. "I am glad you came," he said. Roll shook his hand. "So are we." That was very Grav. The shuttle lifted in the early station cycle. Through the viewport, Orbit 7 shrank behind them, the curved sweep of its rings, the lights along the docking arms, the pale star it circled hanging motionless in the distance. Dara watched it until it was small. Then she pulled out her comm and opened the Galactic Registry. Earth Sentry. The hazard list. She had opened it 100 times since arriving. She read through the tags one more time. Seismic instability. Extreme weather variance. Apex predator saturation. Aggressive microbial ecosystem. Ongoing anomaly. She closed the file. She did not feel triumphant. She felt the way you feel when a long, hard thing is finished and you are tired, but the tiredness is clean. She looked out at the stars. Somewhere in that direction was home. Noise and heat. And rainstorms coming in off the coast. A world that had been trying to kill everything on it since before there was anything worth killing, and had instead, over 1 billion slow years, made something that looked back at the galaxy and said, "We are still here." She leaned her head against the cool viewport glass and let her eyes close. The shuttle carried them home.